Hello, Dan-Dwayne here. So you want to write a novel? Well, you better get started. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to get started. So, I think the first place to start with is to listen to some people who have great wisdom in this area. Let's talk about what Harlan Ellison has to say about it. Now, he's pretty sharp. He's written a lot of stories, and he's very successful. And he said, people on the outside think there's something magical about writing, that you go up in the attic at midnight and cast the bones, and come down in the morning with a story. But it isn't like that. You sit in back of the typewriter and you work, and that's all there is to it. Yeah, he's a pretty smart guy. That's exactly how it works. Well, let's see. E.L. Doctorow, do you know who that is? He wrote Billy Bathgate and Ragtime. Well, he said this: writing a novel is like driving a car at night. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. What is he trying to say? He's trying to say, take it slow. Don't try to write it all at one time. It's not going to happen. And if you did, it wouldn't be any good. Take your reader by the hand. Take them down the road with you. It's a trip. It's a journey. You're going to explore something that they've never seen and never done. But you can't do it all at once. You can only do it a few steps at a time, because that's as far as you can see. It's a pretty smart guy. Yes, it is an analogy, but it's a good analogy. Neil Gaiman, well, he said this: people talk about books that write themselves, and it's a lie. Books don't write themselves. It takes thought and research and backache and notes and more time and more work than you'd believe. Well, that's exactly right. I know where he's coming from. So, you want to get started? There's a couple of things you're going to need. One, you need a plot. In that plot, you've got to put it somewhere, so you have to have a setting. Your setting is critical to your plot. It's going to depend, your plot is going to depend on where your setting is for a lot of the action, because some things cannot take place in certain settings. So, you want to discover your setting, and you want to create lots of red herrings and put all sorts of things in the way of the characters, so that the reader doesn't know where you're heading. Throw those red herrings in there. Throw the distractions in, so they think maybe that the bad guy is not really the bad guy until the end of the story. Or the outcome may be different. That suggestion becomes more of a reality as the book goes on, that you know all along they won't fail. Well, Herman Melville said this about creating a plot or a theme. To produce a mighty book, you must choose a mighty theme. So as you choose your plot and you develop it, make sure it's a mighty one. Well, maybe you want to write like J.K. Rowling and create a wizarding world. Or maybe you want to write like C.S. Lewis. Or you want to write like Clive Cussler, where all of his heroes are agents of a secret organization that's bound to help mankind. Or maybe you write like Dan Brown. However you want to do it, it's your story. You've got to come up with it. Now that you have that in your mind, it's time to talk characters. You need to write down all the characters by name on cards and then make profiles for your characters. You will write down all their likes, their dislikes. You'll write down what they like to eat. You'll write down whether they have nervous twitch. Do they twiddle their hair? Do they chew their nails? Everything that's about them, you're going to write it down on those cards. Everything that there is. You're going to write down who they love, who they hate, why they can't get along with someone. You are profiling that individual. Make profiles for every character. This is very helpful so that when you write that person's dialogue, you can write it in their voice and how they would do it with their attitude. You're going to have some characters that are main characters, and you're going to have some characters that are disposable characters. We all have disposable characters. Maybe it's the waiter that brings the food to the table. If you want to profile that waiter, do so. But I suggest that you give that waiter more of a anonymous character because he's not important. Maybe you just have him as kind of sarcastic. And that's enough because he is, after all, disposable. He's going to be there, he's going to leave, and he's never going to enter the story again. Spend your time profiling the characters that count. Okay, let's move on to the next point. Decide what voice you're going to use. Not the voice of the character, the voice of the story. Is it first person, third person? Does it have a omnipotent narrator, or does it not have a narrator at all? Is the lead character our narrator, and it's set in first person? All is possible. Are you going to set the character in first person, which is our main character, and then the other characters are going to be in third person, and the omnipotent narrator will explain what they're thinking? It's possible too. If you're going to mix your voice, first person, third person, be very sure that you keep it straight. That's pretty advanced. I suggest for your first one, you stick with a first or third person and just stay with it that way. It will be a lot easier in the long run. But if you feel like you want the challenge, you can try it. Go for it. Only you know what you can do. Use your omnipotent narrator. Sometimes they come in handy. It's time to put something down on paper and organize your thoughts. I think there's several ways that you can do that. Create an outline, that is. You can make a formal outline. And a formal outline, you make major points, minor points, point A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, and so on. I made a formal outline with my very first story. It worked out well. It took me 6 years to write it, but it worked out well. I don't use that kind of outline anymore. Well, that was 14 books ago, and I've had many years to decide how I want to do my outlines. Okay, so I'm going to give you an option. If you don't want to do the formal outline, try this. Take a notebook. It's called a notebook outline. Take a notebook, section it off into the time periods that you're going to write in. If you're writing your autobiography, then you're going to have early years, middle years, later years. If you're writing a story like C.S. Lewis and Narnia, then you would have a time period before your characters enter the land of whatever. Then you'll have the time when they are in the land and they are on their journey or quest in the land of whatever. And then you'll have the last of the notebook where they are approaching their goal. They're getting close to where they are supposed to go and accomplishing their quest. And in that last section, they will accomplish their quest. Once you get it all written, it doesn't have to be written in order. You could write it in different sequences, thinking, oh, this is a great story. I'm going to write that in. This is where they go to meet the giant, and there you're going to write that in. And this is where they go and meet the elves, and you write that in. And it may not be in the right order. You can take it out of the notebook, especially if it's a spiral. It's so easy. Just take out the sheets, organize them into a sequence, bundle them, and use them as your outline. You haven't written it yet, so you can fill in the details between those major action points or subplots. So if you are that kind of person, and that sounds like a good kind of outline for you, go for it. But it's not for everybody. Maybe you're the kind of person who needs a mind map. Have you ever heard of a mind map? A mind map is where you take like a circle and you put your circle on the paper. That represents your story arc or all of your plot. Now you'll put little circles inside that big circle, and each one of these is going to represent a subplot or action point. When each one of those circles are marked off, you are almost to the completion of your story. The one that you're looking at is Joan and John, and they're in love. Well, when all the things that stand in their way is overcome and marked off the chart, then they're really close to getting back together, and that is the outcome of the story. Well, we can also take that one step further. In this more advanced mind map, you see we have the overall story arc, we have the circles for the subplots or action points, but they're connected. They have lines that go between them, and they have little lines and little circles around the subplots. Those would be the characters that are involved in that scene. So we have a scene where Joan's brother is condemning her for getting back with John, and she's really mad at him, and they have an argument. Put every one of the characters that's in the scene around the little bubble, around the little circle. Then if that John is in that scene, but he's also in another scene, connect it over, because the scenes have to connect, and you can connect it scene 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as you connect them between each other. This may make sense to you because you think this way. But if it doesn't make sense to you, don't use it. Maybe you're the kind of person who writes a little bit more organically. Let's talk about a more fluid way of making an outline. Now, this is how I taught my students to write their graphic novels that we actually produced in class when I was a teacher. I taught them to take a note card, a 5x7 note card, and on that 5x7 note card, write all the action points and the characters in those action scenes and everything that they can think of on that card for the chapter. So that's a chapter. Then, once you have your cards, you've made up several cards take a ribbon, in this case it's a ribbon, or it could be a cord. Stretch it across the office. Staple, tack, tape, whatever, the cards to the line. The line represents a timeline. That is your sequence. And you're going in sequence as you go from chapter to chapter to chapter to chapter. All of the things on the card are written down that will be in that chapter. If you want more, tear the card in half, add another card in the middle, and attach them. You have just increased the size of your card and made more room for yourself. This is a very fluid way of working, because you can always take a card that was supposed to be chapter 2 and you can take it out because it's not needed. When I wrote Premeditated Pandemonium, I wrote 2 chapters that wasn't needed, and I took them out. But they were on the timeline until I removed them. You can also end up with chapter 3, and it's not really chapter 3. You need to introduce this after you introduce the bad guy. So, chapter 4 becomes chapter 3, and chapter 3 becomes chapter 4. Switch them around. Take them off the ribbon and put them back on. It keeps your mind straight because you're seeing it exactly as you want it to be, without any problems of having to erase a bunch of stuff, edit a bunch of stuff in your computer. It's right there at your fingertips. Maybe that's for you. But you know, all of these things are not for everyone. So I'm going to give you another option here. This is how I write. I use cork boards, and I put them up around the office, and that becomes my timeline. I've profiled my characters. It's on cards. And I put that on the first board, all my profiles. Then from there, I start chapter 1. And I start pinning note cards for each action point on the board. How is this a lot like a mind map? Very similar. So I have my cork boards, my index cards, and my push pins, and everything is put up there. If I decide I need another scene, I just write out a new card, pin it up there, and maybe 2 or 3 cards, all in that scene. And then when it comes time to write it, I look over at the board, I write. My outline is right before my eyes. And that's how I write. Of course, a lot of what I know is in my head already, and a lot of that doesn't really get put on the cork board. It's just up in my head. And that's good and that's bad. Because if I were to get distracted, a very good part of the story could get lost. So I need to make sure that everything gets put on that cork board. I need to be true to my style. Well, that's one way of doing it. After that, it's research. Well, as you write, you're going to research, you're going to write. Research, write. Research, write. Research, write. Until you come up with your first draft. This seems to be the perfect place to talk about first drafts. Well, no one's first draft is perfect. It may seem like it's golden to you because you just wrote it and you are very close to this story. However, you need to let an editor or a friend or someone look at it and help you find the places that are needing some help. Once you work it and rework it, and sometimes I feel like half of my life is spent in revision because it's write, rewrite, write, and rewrite again. Now, what did Ernest Hemingway say about his first drafts? He said they were shit. But they can become something important. You can take and make something good out of that shit that was your first draft. And we all do it. We take that first draft and we work it over and we refine it like it was some metal alloy until it is golden. Have an editor look it over. Correct all the grammar. Bad grammar is a bad novel. Spelling problems, there's no excuse. Not in a day and time where we have spell check. Make sure everything is correct in the story. Get an editor. Join a critique group. Let them help you with your editing. Send it in after you have a beta reader. Read it. And then it's time to find a publisher. And that is a lesson for another video. I believe if you have a story in you, you could be the next great American author. Have a great day.